Hi there, I'm Dr. Deborah Leveroy at Neurobox, and I'm really pleased to share with you today my exploration of the intersection of menopause and autism, drawing from research and lived experience examples. But first, I want to provide you with a brief overview of key terms I'll be using in this talk. Autism is a highly individualized experience that mediates how people communicate, experience, and interact with the world. Whilst everyone is different, characteristics might include intense sensory sensibility and emotional overload, challenges with aspects of verbal and social communication, good attention to detail, original thinking, and subject mastery. The menopause is defined as when a person has had no periods for 1 year or more. Perimenopause is the phase leading up to the menopause and starts when symptoms begin. It's important to consider menopause as an intersectional experience and consider an individual's disability, gender, age, sex, culture, geography, ethnicity, and socioeconomic and lifestyle factors. We can't address the autistic menopausal experience without mentioning gender fluidity, which is a highly common experience amongst the autistic community. Menopause is usually talked about as something that only affects cis women, whose gender identity corresponds to the sex they were assigned at birth. But menopause happens to people of differing genders, those in the trans and non-binary community. I'll be referring to people who experience menopause where I can. When I'm citing existing research, I'll refer to the participant's gender identity if that information is available. The average age a person experiences menopause in the UK is 51, and it's different in other countries and cultures. However, some people experience early or premature menopause, either due to premature ovarian insufficiency or surgical menopause. They can experience menopause at any point from the teenage years onwards, and they will have a different experience of the reproductive milestones. This talk will provide a context of autism, explore autism and the perimenopausal experience from research, look at lived experience examples, barriers to support, and support options. The context of autism. There's been an increase in cases of adult autism diagnosis. Between 1998 and 2018, there was a 787% increase. Now, rates of adult diagnosis have increased the most compared with other age bands. Despite this, there remains chronic underdiagnosis. It's estimated that between 250 to 600,000 people over the age of 50 in the UK are undiagnosed. Historically, far fewer females have been diagnosed with autism than males, and since the 1990s, the ratio is thought to be approximately 1 female in every 4 males. What's the reason for this? Well, there are several theories. The first being that there has been a gender bias in diagnostic criteria. So questions have been based on traditional gender stereotypes and have an overly simplistic concept of sex differences. And as a result, more males are likely to demonstrate the traditional profile of autism. Secondly, the assessment criteria has been less sensitive to autistic traits, more commonly found in females. Thirdly, female children and adults are more likely to camouflage differences. They're more likely to be diagnosed with anxiety and mental health issues. And lastly, the prevalence of male researchers in the field. The extreme male brain theory has unintentionally created an association of autism as a primarily male experience. However, we know that current estimates suggest that for every 1.8 autistic males, so nearly 2 males, there is 1 autistic female. But what do we know about the autistic menopausal experience? So when considering the autistic menopausal experience, it's important to note that there's a lack of research into autism and aging in general. There's a lack of will by funders to invest in aging-related autism research. But some questions to consider are: how does autism shape a person's experience of menopause? What are the challenges particular to this group of people? What are the cognitive and physical challenges? What are the social barriers impacting menopausal people? What support is in place? And do menopausal symptoms decrease after the menopause for autistic people, as they are thought to do in non-autistic people? It's vital that we consider physical health across the life cycle because of both lifestyle and the effects of hormones, childbirth, and menopause. These experiences have been historically neglected in autism research. What we do know is that autistic people who menstruate experience increased emotions and challenges with emotional self-regulation, increased executive functioning difficulties, excessive menstruation symptoms, including unusually painful periods and heavy menstrual bleeding. But what is the experience of autistic people during the perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopausal phase? As we've said, there's scant research on the experiences of autism during the peri and menopausal phases of life. However, a recent study where all participants identified as autistic cisgender women found that they experienced more menopausal complaints than non-autistic cis women. The complaints included psychological aspects, such as depression, and somatic ones, such as headaches, joint and muscle aches. The autistic women stated that the higher the menopausal symptoms, the increased frequency and challenges related to their autism. What is the reason for this? Well, some research suggests that a difference in hormonal balance for autistic people in general might be the cause of increased menopausal complaints. So overall high levels of sensory sensitivity means that autistic people might be more sensitive to the bodily changes and sensations during the perimenopause and menopause stages. But let's connect the research back to an individual's lived experience. And so I'd like you to meet Martha, who's 47, a sales manager, and lives in Woking. She tells us, since childhood, I felt a need to be in control and understand what's happening next. As a kid, I would drive my mum mad asking, what are we doing today, this afternoon, tomorrow? As a teen and young adult, this developed into a highly organised diary system, complete with post-it notes and a colour-coded diary, and a highly structured and predictable working week. One of the biggest challenges I face today as I experience perimenopause is change. Gone are the days of regular predictable periods, of being able to plan and anticipate what was coming around the corner. Suddenly, I don't recognise my body. It's not playing by the rules. It's become unpredictable and unrecognisable. One week, I'll be fine. The next, I'll have a whole week of 4 a.m. night sweats coupled with palpitations. Other weeks, I'll feel completely drained by the regular team meeting at work. I've noticed that my new unpredictable life has heightened pre-existing anxiety, and I now have greater difficulty regulating these emotions. My GP tells me that the drop in progesterone during this perimenopausal phase can lead to heightened stress and anxiety. One of my unhealthy coping mechanisms is food. I've always been a foodie, but since these changes began, I've started eating more for comfort rather than for pleasure or necessity. Eating for comfort soothes me in the short term, and I guess it's a form of stimming or self-soothing. But the resulting weight gain and the sluggish feelings make me feel even more out of step with my body. I've recently began working with a strategy coach to develop healthy coping strategies to explore the impact of perimenopause on my autism. We've put in small routines into my day to break things down, make things more manageable. We've worked on breathing and mindful strategies to counter some of the physical and psychological challenges. And we're looking at ways to manage my energy levels and strategies to improve my thinking skills and memory. Part of the work is recognizing that I'm going through a transitionary stage in life that I can't predict or control, and that it's okay. However, I'm starting to feel that I'm developing some valuable tools to help me navigate these new experiences and hopefully come out of it with, with an increased self-awareness and resilience. So there are several themes running through Martha's experience that I want to touch on. As a child, her need for control and to know what was happening next. As an adult, the comfort she took in the predictability of her monthly cycle. The acute feeling of loss of control once perimenopause symptoms begin. Her body becomes something other and outside of her embodied experience. She no longer relates to it as being hers. Increasing anxiety as a core symptom of her perimenopause. The benefits of support, in this case, her coach. Her ability to develop helpful coping strategies. And finding acceptance with this new normal. Now we meet Serena. Now, Serena was reticent to go to her doctor as she'd had a bad experience with healthcare professionals when seeking her autism diagnosis. She found communication with the GP challenging, making appointments, explaining her experiences over and over again to multiple different people. She already had executive functioning and social communication difficulties, and these were now made worse by the perimenopause. And research tells us that autistic people might have more difficulty expressing their experience of menopause and thus have more difficulties articulating their need for support. She was really uncertain about what would happen, what was the care pathway, and this caused her to have increasing feelings of anxiety. Crucially, she found her sensory sensitivity to light and sound was made worse at this time. And it's thought that some autistic people have acute awareness of physical and sensory sensations. Her existing mental health and emotional regulation challenges were exacerbated during this time, and the existing strategies that she'd developed over many years were no longer working. We know that autistic people are more likely to experience mental health challenges and difficulties with emotional regulation prior to perimenopause. She expresses that she has a lack of a strong network. She has a history of patchy friendships. She doesn't identify with many people, and she feels quite isolated in this experience. She found the symptoms and the lack of support so unbearable. She felt she could not tell people what was happening, and she ended up leaving the workplace. So just to touch on some key themes with Serena's experience around the difficulty accessing healthcare, the impact of prior experiences with healthcare professionals on her, her uncertainty about what was going to happen next, the difficulties around articulating her need, the experience of increasing autistic traits at this time, the lack of network, and of course, the impact on work itself. So what barriers to support exist within society and within work, of course? We've touched on the, if you like, internal barriers of that individual, so previous experiences, existing communication and executive functioning difficulties being exacerbated by the peri and menopausal symptoms and the lack of network. But what about workplace barriers? We know that 1 in 10 people leave the workplace because of a lack of support in dealing with the side effects of menopause. And that's a piece of research done recently by the Fawcett Society. What could be the reason for this? We have several. One may be organisational barriers, so a lack of flexible working arrangements, a lack of policy and processes. Crucially, attitudinal barriers, so the impact of stigma on the individual, and the impact meaning that that individual feels that they cannot share or articulate their need in the workplace. A lack of awareness from employers about the impact menopause can have on some people, and also a lack of awareness from employers about their potential duty. Recent case law has found that some people experiencing the menopause may be considered disabled under the Equality Act. And in such cases, the employer has a duty to provide reasonable adjustments. Examples of adjustments might be ensuring working time arrangements are flexible enough to meet the needs of menopausal people. For example, they may need more breaks during the day or may need to leave work early due to their symptoms becoming more severe. But this is not widely known by employers or workers, and many people with menopausal symptoms struggle to get the employer to accept the need for adjustments. So for anyone who relates to the experience, either as an individual, as an employee, as an employer, as a family member, here are some suggested strategies and support options to explore. So when we're thinking about accessing healthcare, it is important to prepare for appointments in order to mitigate some existing challenges with executive functioning skills. So think about, before you go to your appointment, what you want to say. Write down a list of your symptoms, keep a symptom diary. Also write down any questions you want to ask so that you can, as much as possible, lead the appointment rather than it being something that happens to you. Support. Do you have a friend or a family member or a chaperone from the surgery that can come with you to take notes, to provide sense checking support? Is there an employee network or an online group that you can join where you can find people going through the same experience? In the workplace, can you request adjustments? These might be flexible working, as we mentioned earlier, breaks, changes to uniform, for example. Access to work. This is a government-funded scheme which can recommend and support with the cost of adjustments, such as coaching and equipment. Read our blog for more information on how to apply. A strategy coach. This can be a recommendation out of a workplace needs assessment, and the purpose of this support is to support the individual to develop strategies to mitigate any autistic and menopausal challenges, and also to develop self-advocacy skills in the workplace. Self-advocacy. We have an exercise for you to download. It's a series of reflective questions to help the individual to articulate their strengths, their challenges, helpful strategies, and their support needs in the workplace. Some further questions to explore beyond this particular talk. What are the long-term consequences of a late diagnosis of autism? Do autistic people need specific symptom management during the menopause? What is the experience of autistic people going through early or premature menopause? Are autistic traits affected by menopause, and do they change post-menopause? How do hormonal changes affect autism? How does HRT affect autistic people? And what is the impact of gender-affirming HRT on autistic people? For those of you keen to explore this further, here are some references. You might want to pause the video at this time. And that's all from me today. Thank you for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this area. Please drop me an email or comment if you'd like to continue the conversation.